What if your birthday felt just like any other day? No balloons, no cake, no crowd singing your name. Just a regular Tuesday. Most people can't imagine that because we're taught that birthdays are supposed to be special. But for some, it's not a celebration, it's a reflection. They don't hate their birthday, they just see it differently. Less about parties and more about perspective. So why do some people treat their birthday like it's no big deal? The answer lies deep in psychology, in how we see ourselves, our relationships, and even time itself. From childhood, we're told that birthdays are supposed to be special. A day filled with laughter, attention, and affection, a day that belongs entirely to us. The day we arrived, the day everyone gathers to celebrate our existence. It sounds simple, even beautiful, but behind that seemingly innocent tradition hides something subtle, something heavy, the invisible fatigue of expectations. We grow up watching the world celebrate. Balloons, candles, gifts, parties, every symbol of joy carefully arranged to tell us how we should feel. But for some people, over time, those symbols begin to lose their meaning. The celebration starts to feel less like a choice and more like an obligation. The smiles become practiced, the cheers rehearsed. The party doesn't feel like yours anymore, it feels like a performance being staged around you. And somewhere along the way, the excitement that once defined the day quietly fades. Not because people stop caring, but because the expectations never stop growing. In childhood, birthdays were pure. They meant cake, friends, games, and that warm thrill of being noticed. But adulthood brings a different kind of awareness. The awareness of how much of it is expected, not felt. We start to notice that people celebrate because they should, not necessarily because they want to. And we start to notice that we're expected to respond in the same way. Smiling, thanking, pretending everything is wonderful, even when it isn't. There's a subtle pressure in that, to feel happy on command, to perform joy whether or not we truly feel it. In a world ruled by social media, that pressure has only intensified. Every year, our screens fill with messages, emojis, and recycled wishes from people we haven't spoken to in years. It's nice, in theory, but also strangely hollow. We scroll through the notifications and feel a small flicker of connection, followed by an emptiness that's hard to name. The digital flood of affection doesn't always feel real. And when you sense that, when you notice the performance, you start to question the ritual itself. Do I really feel happy today, or am I just supposed to? That quiet thought can turn a birthday into something heavy, something that carries the weight of every expectation we didn't ask for. For many who treat their birthday like an ordinary day, this isn't about rejection or bitterness. It's about exhaustion, not the kind that comes from lack of sleep, but the kind that comes from emotional overexposure. When every year you're expected to perform gratitude, excitement, and joy, even when you feel neutral or reflective, it becomes easier to simply opt out. It's not a refusal to celebrate life, it's a refusal to fake emotion. There's also a deeper psychological truth at play, the need for authenticity. People who choose to treat their birthday like a normal day are often reclaiming their emotional autonomy, the right to feel whatever they actually feel without being pressured to match the mood others expect. They're no longer chasing the high of external validation. They've realized that being celebrated and being truly happy are not always the same thing. They may spend their birthday quietly, reflecting, walking alone, or doing something meaningful in solitude. To outsiders, it might look melancholy, but to them, it's peaceful. It's real. Imagine someone who's had a difficult year, losses, disappointments, quiet struggles that never made it into conversation. Suddenly, the calendar demands that they be joyful. It's your day, people say, as if that alone can erase the weight of everything that came before. But joy doesn't obey a schedule. Sometimes the most honest thing a person can do is admit they don't feel like celebrating. That honesty isn't negativity, It's integrity, the courage to honor your actual emotional state, rather than decorate it with forced smiles. The invisible fatigue of expectations also shows up in the subtle social anxiety that birthdays often create. Being the center of attention may sound flattering, but for many it's deeply uncomfortable. When everyone's eyes are on you, you start to monitor yourself, your tone, your expression, your reaction to every gift and compliment. Even when surrounded by love, there's a quiet tension in knowing you're being watched. In psychology, this is known as self-conscious emotion, the awareness of being observed, which can lead to discomfort or even guilt. You feel pressure to seem happy enough, grateful enough, enthusiastic enough, and in trying to meet those invisible standards, you lose the authenticity of the moment. So instead of navigating that maze, some people simply step out of it altogether. They choose simplicity. They treat the day as normal, not because they don't care, but because they want peace. What makes this even more complex is the guilt that often follows. When someone decides not to celebrate, they're often misunderstood. Friends or family may take it personally, assuming that refusing a party means rejecting them. "Why don't you want to celebrate with us?" they ask, not realizing that the decision isn't about them at all. It's about energy, about honesty, about the quiet need to exist without performance. But explaining that can be difficult, so the person stays silent, smiles gently, and says, "It's just another day." It's a way to protect themselves from misunderstanding and to protect others from feeling hurt. The invisible fatigue of expectations reveals something profound about modern emotional life. We live in a culture obsessed with celebration, milestones, anniversaries, achievements. But the more we glorify these moments, the more pressure we create around them. The irony is that in our pursuit of happiness, we often forget how to simply be. For those who see birthdays as ordinary, it's not that life has lost its magic, it's that they've stopped needing ritual to feel alive. They've found meaning in quieter places, in daily routines, in small gestures, in the gentle rhythm of existence. Maybe they no longer see the passage of time as something to glorify with confetti. Maybe they see it as something to accept with grace. After all, growing older isn't always about celebration. Sometimes it's about reflection, about acknowledging what's been gained and what's been lost. Some people don't need a crowd to do that. They need silence. And so, when the day arrives, they wake up, make coffee, go about their usual routine. To an outsider, it looks like indifference, but internally, something subtle is happening. There's peace in not being forced to perform joy. There's freedom in allowing yourself to feel exactly what you feel, nothing more, nothing less. It's not sadness, it's sincerity. The invisible fatigue of expectations isn't about rejecting love or tradition, it's about redefining what celebration means. For some, it means music and candles. For others, it means calm and introspection. Neither is right or wrong, they're simply different expressions of the same truth, that happiness cannot be prescribed and joy cannot be forced. So when you meet someone who treats their birthday like a normal day, understand that it might not be a lack of excitement, but the presence of something deeper, emotional maturity, self-awareness, or even quiet healing. They're not trying to escape the moment, they're trying to live it in their own way. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most honest celebration of all. There comes a moment in life when celebration stops being about noise and starts being about meaning. The same people who once filled rooms with laughter, candles, and flashes of cameras begin to seek something quieter, not because they've grown cold, but because they've grown aware. The desire to treat a birthday like any other day is often not born from apathy, but from a deeper psychological evolution, the development of control, maturity, and inner independence. At some point, we realized that much of what we once called joy was actually dependency. Dependency on approval, attention, and external affirmation. As children, we rely on others to show us that we matter. Each birthday card, each wrapped gift, each chorus of happy birthday becomes a confirmation that we are seen. But as we mature, that external confirmation begins to lose its grip. We start to understand that our worth doesn't expand or shrink based on how many people remember a date. The ones who choose not to make their birthday a spectacle have often reached that quiet conclusion, that validation is comforting but not essential. Emotional maturity brings a form of control that can feel radical in a world addicted to attention. It is the control to decide how to feel without asking for permission. When someone says, "It's just another day," they're not belittling life, they are taking ownership of it. They are refusing to let tradition dictate emotion. That is not cynicism, it is sovereignty over one's own inner world. They no longer need a calendar to tell them when to be grateful, or a room full of people to remind them that they are alive. Gratitude for them is woven into the everyday. Their celebration happens quietly, continuously, and privately, in moments that no one else sees. In psychology, this state is often described as self-determination, the ability to make choices guided by intrinsic motivation rather than external influence. It is the essence of inner independence. People who reach this state begin to detach from social scripts. They no longer measure happiness by public display, and they are comfortable with solitude. That comfort is not isolation, it's a form of inner stability. They've stopped confusing being alone with being unloved. In fact, solitude becomes sacred, a space where they can recharge, reflect, and reconnect with their authentic self. This inner control also changes how they relate to time. Birthdays often symbolize the passing of another year, a countdown that fuels anxiety about aging, achievements, and expectations. But to the mature mind, time is no longer an enemy or a scoreboard. It sees it as rhythm. Each year is not something to celebrate or fear, but simply to notice. To someone with inner independence, the passage of time is not a threat, it's context. It's the quiet backdrop of an unfolding story that doesn't need an audience. The focus shifts from how much time has passed to how consciously that time has been lived. Control in this sense is not about suppression, it's about awareness. These individuals are not emotionally numb. They still feel joy, sadness, nostalgia, tenderness, but those emotions arise naturally, not because the world demands them. Emotional maturity gives them the power to choose authenticity over performance. They can be happy without a reason, reflective without guilt, grateful without witnesses. That's the difference between emotional dependence and emotional freedom. When celebration is no longer a reaction to others, but an extension of one's own peace, the act of living itself becomes the celebration. There's a certain quiet dignity in people who live this way. They walk through their birthdays with calm eyes and an unhurried heart. They might still receive messages, gifts, or calls, and they appreciate them, but they don't cling to them as proof of value. They understand that love expressed loudly is not necessarily deeper than love expressed softly. Their happiness no longer depends on the intensity of attention, but on the authenticity of connection. They've learned that it's better to have one sincere conversation than 100 obligatory greetings. For some, this maturity comes after years of disappointment, forgotten birthdays, half-hearted gestures, or celebrations that felt hollow. For others, it emerges naturally with age as priorities shift from being seen to simply being. Whatever the path, the destination is the same: freedom from the emotional turbulence of expectation. It's not that these people don't enjoy celebration, they just no longer require it to feel whole. Their sense of worth comes from within, from a private understanding that their existence has meaning regardless of recognition. There's also a subtle psychological paradox here. The more a person develops inner independence, the more deeply they can connect with others, not out of need, but out of choice. They no longer seek relationships to fill emptiness, but to share completeness. That shift changes everything. When they interact, it's not to be validated, but to be genuine. When they receive affection, it's not to heal insecurity, but to exchange warmth. And when they celebrate, on any day, not just their birthday, it's an authentic extension of joy, not an obligation. In a society that constantly tells us to mark milestones with noise, choosing silence becomes an act of rebellion. But it's a peaceful rebellion. It's the quiet assertion that meaning does not require witnesses. In the same way that meditation turns stillness into strength, choosing simplicity turns normal days into something sacred. The person who treats their birthday as ordinary might actually experience it more deeply than anyone else, precisely because they are not distracted by performance. They feel the texture of the day, the morning light, the warmth of coffee, the sound of their own breathing. They notice life instead of decorating it. That awareness, subtle and continuous, becomes its own form of gratitude. The psychology of control and maturity also involves understanding impermanence. Birthdays remind us that time is moving, that we are aging, that life is finite. But to those who have achieved emotional independence, that realization isn't frightening, it's grounding. Accepting impermanence gives them a sense of control, not over time itself, but over their relationship with it. They no longer chase eternal youth or endless excitement. They learn to inhabit each moment fully, knowing it will pass. And in that acceptance, they find a serenity that celebration alone can't offer. True control, then, is not about resisting life's rhythm, but about aligning with it. It's about living intentionally rather than reactively. It's knowing that joy can exist in quiet places and that significance doesn't need to announce itself. When someone treats their birthday like any other day, it's not because they've lost their sense of wonder. It's because they've found it elsewhere. Every morning feels like a small beginning. Every evening feels like a moment of reflection. Life becomes a continuous ceremony rather than a collection of isolated parties. Maturity is often mistaken for indifference, but in truth, it's the opposite. It's sensitivity refined by understanding. It's the ability to feel deeply without needing the world to validate those feelings. The person who no longer depends on celebration is not colder, they are freer. They have outgrown the fragile need for ritual approval and replaced it with a stable, quiet gratitude that lasts beyond a single day. Their joy doesn't vanish when the candles are blown out because it was never dependent on the candles in the first place. So when someone says, "I don't really celebrate my birthday anymore," it might sound distant, but it often comes from a place of peace. They have learned that control doesn't mean suppressing life's colors. It means painting with their own palette. Maturity doesn't mean the absence of joy. It means choosing joy that's real. And inner independence doesn't mean detachment from others. It means connection without dependence. They don't need applause to feel alive or reminders to feel grateful. They carry their celebration within them, not once a year, but every single day they wake up and choose to live deliberately. That, perhaps, is the quietest and most profound freedom of all.
Behind the calm of those who treat their birthday like any other day, there sometimes hides a softer, more fragile truth, the quiet shadow of loneliness. It's not always visible, even to the person themselves. It doesn't scream or demand attention. It lingers gently in the background, woven through silence and reflection. For some, that choice to skip the celebration is not only a symbol of independence, but also a form of emotional self-protection, a way to guard the most delicate parts of their soul from being touched too roughly. Loneliness is a strange companion. It doesn't always mean the absence of people. Sometimes it means standing in a crowded room and feeling unseen. It's the subtle ache of realizing that connection and closeness are not the same thing. And on a day like a birthday, when the world insists that you should feel surrounded by love, that difference becomes painfully clear. The contrast between expectation and reality sharpens, and what should feel like warmth can instead feel like a spotlight on emptiness. Many people who choose to ignore their birthday do so not because they despise the attention, but because they fear what it might reveal. The day becomes a mirror, one that reflects not only age and time, but also the emotional distance that sometimes grows quietly between people. When the messages come in, when the calls are made, something inside them listens for sincerity. They notice who reaches out from genuine care and who does so from habit. And when that difference becomes obvious, it can sting. So they learn to soften the blow by lowering expectations altogether. It's just another day, they tell themselves, not as denial, but as emotional armor. There's a quiet intelligence in that. Avoiding the spotlight is sometimes a way to protect one's inner stability. To celebrate without joy feels dishonest. To pretend connection where there is none feels lonely in itself. So they choose neutrality. A simple day. A routine unchanged. No forced laughter, no polite conversations that end in emptiness. Just silence. And in that silence, a kind of truth. Psychologically, this behavior can be understood through emotional regulation, the unconscious attempt to maintain equilibrium when facing potential pain. By treating their birthday as a normal day, a person limits the emotional highs and lows that might otherwise surface. It's not repression, it's balance. The absence of a party isn't always the presence of sadness. Sometimes it's the presence of self-awareness, the recognition that certain feelings are easier to process privately than in front of others. But loneliness has its own gravity. It shapes thought, perception, and memory. People who have felt emotionally unseen for long periods often develop deep introspection, the habit of turning inward, of analyzing, of searching for meaning within rather than around them. On days like birthdays, this introspection can become intense. While others celebrate milestones, these individuals measure growth differently. They ask questions that sound simple, but cut deep. Am I living the life I wanted? Am I the person I thought I'd become? And who still truly knows me? Those questions don't need answers. They exist to remind the person that reflection is also a form of existence. There's beauty in this solitude. The same quiet that can carry loneliness also carries wisdom. When you stop filling silence with noise, you begin to hear yourself more clearly. For people who have learned to live without grand celebrations, the day becomes a private ritual of thought. They may write, walk, read, or simply sit in stillness. To an outsider, it might look like emptiness. But inside, something profound unfolds. A slow conversation with the self. It's a moment to acknowledge the years that have passed and the emotions that have settled, to accept what cannot be changed and forgive what still lingers. But introspection is a double-edged mirror. The same depth that brings understanding can also bring melancholy. Reflecting too deeply can awaken memories long buried, moments of being forgotten, dismissed, or unloved. Birthdays, as cultural symbols of affection, can reopen those old wounds. Even the absence of calls or messages can echo louder than noise. The mind replays patterns. Maybe they forgot. Maybe they don't care. Maybe I was never that important. The rational part knows better, but emotions rarely obey reason. So, many choose prevention. They dim the lights before the ache can appear. If nothing is expected, nothing can disappoint. But the truth is that loneliness isn't always a symptom of something broken. Sometimes it's a stage of growth, the quiet before transformation. In solitude, people learn to see themselves not through the eyes of others, but through their own. They rediscover forgotten desires, unspoken dreams, and small joys that exist without validation. The person who spends their birthday alone might not be mourning absence, they might be reclaiming presence, their own. Modern psychology often distinguishes between social loneliness and existential loneliness. The first is the lack of companionship. The second is the recognition that no matter how many connections we have, each of us ultimately walks through life as a singular consciousness. That realization can be painful, but it can also be liberating. The people who treat their birthday like a normal day are often more in touch with this existential awareness. They've accepted that the core of human experience is solitary, that no one else can live your life, feel your feelings, or carry your memories exactly as you do. Once that acceptance settles in, solitude loses its sting. It becomes space, wide, quiet, and strangely comforting. There's also a spiritual undertone in this kind of introspection. When you strip away the noise of celebration, what remains is raw existence, breathing, aging, being. A birthday becomes less about marking a year survived and more about acknowledging consciousness itself. Some people find more meaning in a single silent morning than in a crowded evening full of noise. The simplicity reveals the essence of life, presence without performance. And yet, the shadow remains. Even the most self-aware, independent mind is still human, still wired for connection. There are moments, even in peace, when the quiet feels too wide, when the self feels too heavy to hold alone. On those days, loneliness doesn't vanish through control or maturity. It needs to be seen, acknowledged, maybe even gently held. People who reject celebration entirely sometimes forget that allowing others to care can also be an act of strength. Letting someone in doesn't mean losing independence. It means accepting that even solitude is softer when shared. Perhaps the balance lies somewhere between silence and song, between the comfort of solitude and the courage to reach out. The person who treats their birthday as an ordinary day might still crave a small gesture, a message that feels real, a word that carries sincerity instead of obligation. Authenticity doesn't need volume, it needs presence. One honest connection can be enough to light a small flame in all that quiet. In the end, the psychology of those who walk alone on their birthdays is not about rejecting love or denying joy. It's about learning to coexist with both light and shadow, to embrace reflection without drowning in it. Their calm is not emptiness, but understanding. Their silence is not absence, but choice. They have learned that life is not always meant to be loud to be meaningful. Sometimes it's in the stillness, in the quiet rhythm of their thoughts, in the weight of a single candle burning slowly in the dark, that they feel most alive. So when you meet someone who spends their birthday in solitude, don't rush to fill their silence. You might be standing next to a person who has learned one of life's rarest skills, the ability to find peace in their own company. Behind their calm smile may live both loneliness and wisdom, intertwined. The shadow and the light coexist, and maybe in the gentle space between them lies the truest form of celebration, not of age or attention, but of simply being here, still breathing, still learning, still becoming.